Hi, this is Pete from GS2. I wanted to do a quick little video on how I got into this hobby of mine in retirement. I'm a retired mechanical engineer, not electrical. And I started to bought a couple kits, and I built some tube amps, and next thing I know I'm building a workroom for myself, which you can kind of see here from the distance. And it never started off, I never thought I'd be doing this sort of stuff like I do now, but I really enjoy it. I learn a lot, I make a lot of mistakes, which is part of anything. And so, you know, that said and done, I remember as a kid seeing the yellow warm glow of tubes in the back of a TV set and some AM radios, and was just fascinated by it. Again, throughout my career, never really saw them again, and ran into a couple buds that had tube amplifiers in their house, and man, they sounded good. Or guys I knew were still playing in bands, you know, guitars, and God, they just sounded so good. And there was always that little hum, you know, and there was this anticipation of, you'd hear that hum, and then usually something good was going to come, you know, nice live band. So I had this kind of innate thing about tubes. So I can honestly say I'm a tube guy. Don't get me wrong, I use transistorized op amp, MOSFET amplifiers in some of my work, Class D in particular, Class G also, but mostly tubes. So that's kind of how I got into it. And then I'm not sure if people are interested in doing this sort of stuff or not, but I found out that I learned, again, this kind of comes from my engineering background. There was some different places that I went for parts and materials, because I found a schematic or something online, and I found that there's a place called Tube Depot, and you can buy tubes and components and stuff from them in kits. Parts Express, DigiKey, you can get components. Hammond Manufacturing, get my transformers from there. Antique Electronic Supply, and there's probably a half a dozen more that I didn't list that could go on to that. And you know, and that is kind of where I started. I built a couple kits, and then, you know, of course you buy the kit and everything is in there, and there was just a lot of stuff to learn. So, you know, that's some of the places I go to get materials, parts, supplies. Parts Express does a good job with speakers. That's about all I ever buy from them. But they do sell kits, and they sell some other stuff too. They're a good company. One of the places that, one of the things I also had to know is, like, you know, where do I learn about this stuff? And I think I got my first introduction to, I found myself on YouTube watching a guy by the name of Dave Carlson. I think his first name is Dave. It was Mr. Carlson's lab. And he was always fixing and doing something other, and he built this kind of lab that had all this old equipment hanging around him all over there. It looked kind of cute. But he had some neat projects, and it sparked my curiosity. Then, of course, there's a guy named Uncle Doug. Been around for a long time. You see a lot of his videos on YouTube. He's the guy who really, really gave me the courage to, you know, let's give it a shot. Let's try it. You know, that is maybe buying something that's old and fixing it up, or making something new. Uncle Doug, a lot of videos out there. Another guy's name is Rob Robinette. Kind of find his stuff on the internet, and I've got a 3-ring binder that I started to gather some of his stuff up. And then, of course, another guy named Merlin Blenko. He's got a series of books out there. You can find some of his stuff on the internet, but I bought a few of his books. I'm going to show one in a second here. So these are the sources that got me started, that got me interested, that gave me information that I could build upon. You know, and this Merlin, or this Rob Robinette guy, he has a bunch of stuff, like, you know, tube, guitar, amp, overdrive units, and he, you know, comes up with this major statement that really blew me away. It's, you know, and it's underlined here, it's highlighted. Benjamin Franklin guessed wrong on the direction of electron flow. So I remember reading that, going, oh, what does that mean? Well, once I started to work with some of these schematics and see how tubes work, it was like, well, I thought current went this way, you know. Anyway, it was an eye-opener. So Robinette's got a lot of stuff out there. You can find him on the internet. I started to collect his stuff and print it off and put it in a 3-ring binder, the anal engineer that I am. Then another source that came in I mentioned was a guy named Merlin Blenko. This is one of his books. I've got 3 or 4 of them, Designing Power Supplies for Tube Amplifiers. And he really does a good job of explaining things for the folks who don't have a master's in electrical engineering. And he really does a good job of, kind of breaking things down. And it's new to me. Maybe other people, they've been doing this stuff all their life, but I learned quite a bit by going through his books with a highlighter and all that stuff. And that's kind of another place that helped give me some backing or some, I'm not going to say courage, but some the ability to try some new things. So, and then on the internet, you could find all sorts of stuff, schematics in particular. This one happens to be for a Marshall amp, JCM 800 Lead Series 2204. I actually built one of these for a friend of mine. It was, I'm not going to get into the great details of this thing, but I have a video out there on this one, but it was something that was a real learning experience. There were some of the notations I didn't understand. This comes from the UK, so some of the things they do there, like here in the States, when you walk into a room, you want to flip the switch up, that turns it on. Well, it's opposite. The switch is down when it's off, and or it's off. It's down when it's on. It's the exact opposite. This is another one I built. This is a Fender. What the heck was this thing? This is a Fender Twin, 1957, I believe. Nice little project. This is probably the first one I built from schematic. And you really can't see it, but what I'm really trying to get around to is you can find these schematics online. Just search for schematics. I'm sure there's probably websites that have these things. And I do a lot of my work on AutoCAD. So this happens to be a Fender Champ that I built. And the one over on the left side of this frame is the actual schematic that I pulled off some printed thing, and then I put it into AutoCAD so I could manipulate it a little bit. And then what I end up doing to it is I actually will convert it over to a layout type of drawing where it actually is closer to how it would be inside the enclosure that I'm going to put it in. And so this was a I think it's a 64, it's an AA764 Fender Champ amp, 5 watts. And I'm actually using it, I'm not a guitarist, but I'm trying to learn a little bit. And this thing actually sounds pretty good. So I have a video on the Champ amp, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. So that's kind of what got me interested, finding out where the sources of materials are and such. And then, of course, I had to buy some stuff. Probably a real important thing is get yourself a good soldering unit. Not the kind that comes from the hobby store that just plugs in, or the old gun thing that they used to have, back in the day. Get yourself a good one that you can change the temperature on. I use primarily I think it's a 60% tin, 40% lead. There's all sorts of different diameters, and depending upon what you're doing, get yourself soldered. I buy it, of course, in larger rolls because I use quite a bit of it when I'm on projects. Getting some solder wick, so you can mop up some solder on something that you just soldered and realize it's not what you wanted to do. And then I also saw a couple guys doing guitar amp repairs, and they use these little solder suckers, and you push them in there, and you push this tube down on there, whatever you're going to get hot, and then you press the button and it sucks it out. So they don't last forever, so you get a couple of them. But those are some of the things that I had to buy right off the bat. A couple of kits I started to build, I couldn't really do well with my old soldering iron from my dad from the 60s. So, and I got myself a little vise so I can do things. Got a couple voltmeters, nice to have around for measuring volts. These are not your real expensive type. They're just plain old dumb old digital multimeters. Then I bought a component tester so I can put capacitors, resistors in there and just check the values to make sure they're where they should be. And probably because I'm a real anal engineer, former engineer, I got a labeler. And these are something that helps me get organized, and that kind of draws me back to what's on the shelves. I got nuts and bolts, different thread pitches, wire connectors of sorts, Got a whole container that says glue. And then some, place up here for switches, and then these are all capacitors and pots and batteries and stuff like that. So for me, it was, got more storage places. And I decided I was doing some project work, and I thought, well, I should probably buy some resistor. And they sold these resistor kits, which I probably wouldn't recommend you do. These are 2 watts. Got a cabinet that's 1 watt, different resistances, half watt, and then quarter watt. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I probably shouldn't have bought these, but it's actually been kind of convenient. So when I'm working on a project, I can go to my stock and go from there. So bought a small little DC power supply, nothing special, and a function generator, so I could put a different type of waveform, say a sine wave, into something and see what comes out. And I bought a couple inexpensive scopes. This one here is just a plain old dumb old scope. It doesn't do too much except time domain stuff. This one here has got the ability to do some math, and I can do an FFT, a fast Fourier transform, so I can look at the time domain on one scope, and I can look at what's going on in the frequency domain. It's not important that you know that, but it's something that, as I was developing some of the projects, things didn't go right because I didn't build it right, or there were examples in certain other websites I went to that, kind of would, if you put a sine wave at 3,000 hertz in here, this is what you should get out. I also got a variac, so I can change the voltage input coming into something, especially I'm working on something very old. That really helps. Isolation transformer I've got around here somewheres, and one of those little things that you see guys have rigged up, have a light bulb, so if you have a dead short, the light bulb goes off and you don't burn yourself up. Real important. Getting the right kind of wire to do this sort of thing, and learning how to solder. There's videos out there to help you teach you how to solder, how to tin wires, how to do that sort of stuff. It was some set of skills I never had. So lots of videos out there on YouTube that people will tell you, show you how to do stuff. And then that kind of is in a nutshell how I got started, why I got started, and then how I kind of continue to this day. And I will build, I put I've got storage shelves all over here, and got some transformers on projects that are coming up. Things I've already built. This is they call it a color amp. This is a project I found online that I built. And then I put these little project boxes down here so I can, as I start to gather parts up for a project, like this is one I'm going to be building. I'm going to be building another Marshall amp here. This is a JCM 800 2204. I'm going to be building this one again, so I'll come up with a little spreadsheet so I can keep track of my parts, and and probably the most important thing that I think any builder has to have is kind of tie wraps. So I bought a bunch of containers, and I started putting things up on the wall, and it just sort of came to be. I can't say I had a grand plan, got myself a couple toolboxes so I could put, my wrenches in there and such, and screwdrivers, and again, I never really planned to go down this road, but once I got into it, I realized I had to get organized, especially if I was doing projects one after the other, because you order your parts, and I'd start on the design work on the next one, and and so all that said and done, that's kind of how I got into it. I really enjoy it. I have 2 requirements. I heard some video on somebody said, you want to have fun doing this sort of thing, and you want to make sure you don't get electrocuted, number 1. Number 2, you don't want it to start on fire. So that's kind of my basic criteria for success. And and I learn as I go. I've made a lot of mistakes doing some projects, and I go to check them out, and they don't work like I want, or work like I think they should, or work like the manufacturer says they should. And so I'm take them apart, and I learn more and more every time I think that I've got it all figured out. I run across a project or a component I've never seen before, or some notation I've never seen before. And there's some really great videos on YouTube. I can't say enough about YouTube, for some guys who repair old guitar amps. And man, it is so cool to watch those guys. and they seem to know exactly where to go. Like, oh, these old capacitors, they're probably blown. Let's not even check them. Let's just yank them and put new stuff in there. And they really do a good job of cleaning up the environment of these old things made in the 50s and 60s, and they make them sound like brand new. You know, they do that for a living. I just do this for a hobby. So kind of close it off. It's Pete from GS2. If you want to get into this stuff, this is how I got started. I'm not saying you have to do this, but you got to buy some equipment, get some wire, find some sources to buy some stuff, look for some schematic. I would suggest, if you want to get into it, buy a kit. You know, that's a good way to go. They do a pretty good job of those. I think the first one I ever built was a Dynakit SD70, 35 watts per channel. That was a great kit to build. I still have it. It's a phenomenal sound. I really like it. So anyway, have fun, build these things, enjoy yourself, be careful, be safe. There's high voltages in here. You really got to be careful. Can't stress that enough. So, and there's a lot of videos out there. There's a lot of, I actually took a theory class about how to build guitar amps, and I learned a lot in that class and some of the mistakes that people can make. And again, high DC voltages, be very, very careful. If you're not sure, ask questions, pause, just be careful, take your time. So again, hopefully this can help someone out there get on this path. It's a lot of fun. Thanks.